Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Washington Watch. Coming up is a new left-leaning coalition government coming together in Israel. Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett announced an 11th-hour deal last night that could be the end of Benjamin Netanyahu's historic 12-year run as Prime Minister. We'll get more from CBN's Middle East correspondent and bureau chief Chris Mitchell, who will come live from Jerusalem. And unable to convince Americans with their often conflicting words and actions, the Biden administration is trying something else to persuade Americans to get the COVID-19 shots.
Get a shot and have a beer. Free beer for everyone 21 years or over to celebrate the independence from the virus.
The president announcing a month of action in trying to get Americans to take the COVID shot. He also announced that he assigned Vice President Harris to lead a, quote, "we can do this" vaccination tour. I'm assuming he hopes it'll be more successful than her efforts in solving the border crisis, to which he assigned her as well. We'll talk about it with Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson a little later in the program. And did U.S. funding go to the Wuhan lab in China for the purpose of creating biological agents like COVID-19? We'll talk with Asian expert Gordon Chang here on Washington Watch. The NCAA is taking heat from leftists for not following through on the boycotts of states that are taking common sense steps like prohibiting biological males from participating in women's sports. Why the backpedaling from the NCAA? Well, in reality, there would be few places they could play since so many states are passing these common sense pieces of legislation. The Louisiana legislature is one of the latest states to pass a girls' sports bill, but the governor, a Democrat, has threatened to veto the measure. We'll talk with the bill's author, State Senator Beth Mizell, later here on Washington Watch. And last night, our Pray Vote Stand weekly program was focused on critical race theory. I certainly encourage you to check it out. It was very, very informative. You can find out more at TonyPerkins.com or PrayVoteStand.org. But one of the messages from last night was for parents to get involved and to take action. Well, one parent in Nevada, along with her son, they're taking action. They're suing the school district, first suit of its kind, over critical race theory. Gabrielle Clark, head of the Nevada chapter of No Left Turn in Education, joins us later to tell their story. The website, TonyPerkins.com. If you're on the free speech platform of Gab, it's at Tony_Perkins. All right, late Wednesday night in Israel, a coalition of different parties from across the political spectrum, including for the first time in Israel's history, an Arab Islamist party, was formed with the aim of unseating Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In response, the Prime Minister on Thursday, via Twitter, called upon all legislators on the right to oppose what he labeled as a dangerous left-wing government. With me now to give us the latest on what is happening in Israel is Chris Mitchell, the Middle East Bureau Chief for the Christian Broadcasting Network. Chris, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Tony, great to be with you.
So, Chris, what's the latest there? I know it's late in the night there in Israel. What's happening?
Well, the latest, Tony, right now is probably have about a week, maybe 10 days before the new coalition government that was formed last night gets ratified or gets a vote of confidence from the Knesset. Until then, really, the government has not been formed. It needs that vote. And right now, it seems like there will be an attempt by the Likud and Bibi Netanyahu to try to just maybe get one, even two members of this new coalition to defect and not vote for the government. Right now, they only have 61 seats. That's the minimum necessary to form a government. If one or two of those members will not vote for the government, that means that government won't be formed, and Israelis could actually be going to the fifth election in just over 2 years.
It has been so narrowly divided there, where these coalition governments have had one or two seats that make the difference, and so one move can cause the coalition to fall apart. Naftali Bennett, a really kind of a protege of Benjamin Netanyahu, that's got to create some friction there in Israel.
A lot of friction, and you could say it's the Israeli version of Game of Thrones, Tony. You know, a lot of people have disagreed ideologically and but also personally. As you say, Naftali Bennett was a protege of Benjamin Netanyahu, and they've really had a personal falling out. And really what you've seen over here, Tony, is the fact that really all these parties are getting together. They have widely different views on ideology. The one thing that's holding them together is they want Benjamin Netanyahu to be ousted as the prime minister. And so right now, even if they do get the government, many people don't think that this government will last. Some have said that Israelis will go to elections before Americans go to elections in 2022 in the midterms. What you have is you have parties from the far left, from the far right, and you have, as you mentioned, this Arab Islamist party. And if any one of those disagrees with, say, major issues like what's going to happen with the biblical heartland of Israel, Judea and Samaria, this government could fall. It may not last very long if it gets ratified by the Knesset in about a week.
Now, Chris Mitchell, if I'm counting correctly, this coalition government is made up of 8 different parties, very diverse from the right to the left. Other than Benjamin Netanyahu being a common target for them, what will hold them together so that they can work together and actually govern Israel?
That's the big question right now, Tony. Can they hold together? We talked earlier today to the former U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, and he said he's waiting to find out really how they're going to be able to govern. Major issues, as I mentioned, Judea and Samaria, the Meretz party, which is far left, is just an example. They would prefer probably a 2-state solution, giving some of back of this biblical heartland to the Palestinian Authority. That's something that's anathema to, say, Yamina and Naftali Bennett, or New Hope and Gideon Sa'ar. So there are so many issues, including gay rights, including the judiciary, that this government could fall. And so that's the ideological glue holding it together, is ousting Benjamin Netanyahu. And there's not much more than that, putting them all together.
Now, I want to go into those issues for just a moment, because some of these parties on the left are pushing for what are described more secular rights, pushing back against the Orthodox. What are some of those secular rights that they're seeking to expand there in Israel?
Well, one thing would be the observance of the Sabbath. The religious parties want all of Israel to observe the Sabbath, to have no public transportation. There would be, no businesses open on those on the Sabbath, and yet some of the secular Israelis are pushing to expand those rights. So that would be one main thing for the religious parties. The other thing is, many religious or the ultra-Orthodox don't serve in the military. That's been a source of contention for many years here. And some of the secular Israelis would push more for the ultra-Orthodox to serve in the IDF in some form. So these are all contentious issues, and all meaning that whether or not this coalition government can succeed.
Chris Mitchell, are there some parallels to what has taken place in America? I mean, I've met with Prime Minister Netanyahu on a number of occasions, a strong leader. I think Israel needs a strong leader, but obviously in that process you put off some people. He's kind of like, in many ways, Donald Trump, that attracts a lot of opposition. And a lot of people were opposed to Donald Trump, especially in the media and the establishment. Is it a similar situation there in Israel?
I would think so, Tony. In fact, the media has attacked, the Israeli media, that is, has attacked Benjamin Netanyahu for many years, much like the media in the U.S. attacked former President Trump. The same thing with part of the institutions, at least the contention of some people that support Benjamin Netanyahu is believe that the police and the judiciary have really come against him. Right now, he's facing 3 indictments for bribery, breach of trust, and fraud. Those trials have actually started, and many people that support Netanyahu, he calls it himself a witch hunt. So this is very similar to what former President Donald Trump has gone through is exactly what Benjamin Netanyahu is experiencing right now.
Do you think, Chris Mitchell, what happened here in the United States with this lurch to the left with our government had an influence on Israel?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I think it did, Tony, and I think that's probably why you have some of these parties getting together. That and Yair Lapid has really been heading this drive to get a coalition. He was the one that had the second mandate. Netanyahu had the first. He was unable after 28 days to form a coalition. He narrowly missed that just by a few votes. And what Yair Lapid right now is banking on is, as we had talked earlier, this Arab Islamist party called Ra'am. Their 4 seats are really critical to be able to form this coalition. Without that, this government wouldn't have been formed.
And I understand that part of the negotiations with them, they may have a deputy slot in the Prime Minister's office.
Yeah, I think it would be a deputy interior minister, and they want more infrastructure for the Arab parties, the Arab section here of Israel, which a lot of people do agree with. One thing they want is down south in the Negev. There's been a lot of illegal building by the Bedouin community down there. They want that legalized. So these are just some of the demands that he made while they signed late last night. And Tony, it was the last day of Lapid's mandate, and really he got it within like about a half an hour to be able to get all these 8 parties to sign, which is really a sign of their negotiations were very, very difficult, and it's really just maybe a sign of how difficult it will be for this coalition government if it gets ratified by the Knesset to be able to govern. And one other thing, Tony, a lot of people are concerned by the political weakness going on right now and the instability. Israel is surrounded by enemies, Hamas to the south, Hezbollah to the north, Iran's nuclear program, very concerned about the internal weakness given all the threats that Israel's facing right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question, if this is in fact a moment of vulnerability for Israel, because they've had stability for over a decade now with Netanyahu at the helm.
Very much so. And even people that do not like or dislike Benjamin Netanyahu agree that he's probably Israel's strongest leader on the world stage. And he's been able to face off Iran for years and face off internal pressure as well as these external threats. And the question is whether or not a man like Naftali Bennett, he has been education minister, defense minister, but does he have the sort of the gravitas to be holding off and representing Israel on the world stage, given that there are so many threats and pressures here in the region?
Certainly interesting times. Chris Mitchell, always great to talk with you. Thanks for staying up late and joining us from Jerusalem.
Great to be with you, Tony.